The first bell hadn't rung yet. Students drifted through the halls of Redwood High, dragging their backpacks and early morning moods. Custodians moved quietly in the background, mopping, emptying trash, restocking supplies. No one paid much attention. Mr. Dorsey, the head janitor, nodded to his team as he walked through the main corridor. He wore a navy work shirt, faded from years of washes, with a patch that just read J. Dorsey. His boots were clean but old. His posture was upright, his steps slow but certain. He paused near the front office. Inside, a new assistant secretary was organizing a binder. Mid-20s, brisk and well-dressed, with the kind of confidence that suggested she'd only ever worked jobs where people listened the first time. She looked up as he entered. "Maintenance requests go through facilities," she said automatically, not bothering to ask why he was there. Dorsey didn't correct her. He looked around, scanning the office. "Is Principal Moore in?" The woman blinked. "She's not available right now." A beat. "Do you need to leave a message?" "No," he said calmly. "I'll wait." The tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't deferential either. That seemed to unsettle her. She glanced at the badge on his chest, then back to his face. "You'll wait here." He nodded once and took a seat near the door, hands resting on his knees, still watching. She picked up the phone but didn't dial. Something about the way he sat made her hesitate. 5 minutes passed, then 10. And then the district's HR director stepped into the office, spotted Dorsey, and froze. "Sir," she said, voice lifting with recognition. "I didn't realize you'd arrived already." The secretary turned, confused. HR continued, smiling now. "Principal Moore's just finishing up a call. She's expecting you." Dorsey stood, nodded once, and followed her in. The secretary watched him go, lips parted slightly, as the realization began to form. But that was only the beginning. The office was small. Too small, really, for the conversation that was about to happen. Principal Moore stood as Dorsey entered. Mid-40s, tailored suit, every strand of her hair in place. She smiled quickly, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mr. Dorsey," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "I appreciate you coming in so early." Dorsey sat without comment. She wasn't sure what she'd expected him to say. A greeting? Some indication that he was nervous? He offered neither. Moore cleared her throat and adjusted a folder in front of her. "I know you've toured the campus a few times with the transition team," she said. "It's a great school. Of course, there's always room for improvement." Dorsey watched her, quiet. She kept going. "Enrollment's steady. Test scores are average, but trending upward. We've implemented a few new behavior programs this year, positive reinforcement strategies, peer mentoring. There are some staffing gaps, but we're managing." He let the silence stretch a beat longer before speaking. "How many custodial staff do you have?" She blinked. 6, she replied. "Well, 5 right now. We're hiring for a night shift position." "And how often do you meet with your facilities team?" he asked. Moore hesitated. I don't directly. The district handles that." He nodded slowly. "Do you know the name of the head custodian?" Another pause. "I believe it's Mr. Alvarez." Dorsey gave a small shake of his head. "He retired 3 months ago." Moore opened her mouth, then closed it again. Outside the office, the bell rang. A low hum of student voices rose through the walls. Dorsey leaned back slightly, his voice still calm. "You've got good programs. That much is clear. But a school isn't just what happens in the classroom." Moore gave a tight nod, unsure where this was going. And then he added, "Before I took this job, I spent 2 months here." Quietly, in uniform, her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "Cleaning," he continued. "Watching, listening. Because if I really wanted to understand this school, I needed to see how people were treated when they didn't carry a title." Moore froze. Outside, students moved down the halls, laughing, shuffling, calling to one another. Inside, the room had gone still. Principal Moore sat straighter in her chair, the smile now gone. "You worked here? As a janitor?" she asked, the words cautious, not quite sure whether to sound surprised, skeptical, or embarrassed. Dorsey didn't answer the question directly. "I cleaned classrooms, scrubbed bathroom floors, hauled cafeteria trash," he said simply. "I was invisible. People held doors open sometimes. Sometimes they didn't." Moore swallowed. Her hands fidgeted with a pen on her desk. I see. No, Dorsey said, not unkindly. You don't. Not yet. He let the silence stretch again, not to intimidate, just to give it room to settle. Your staff runs this place like a machine, he continued, but only from one side, front office, teaching faculty, administrative priorities. There's a whole other ecosystem here that doesn't get seen unless something breaks. I'm not sure I follow. Maintenance requests sit unanswered for weeks. Custodians eat lunch in a storage room behind the boiler. A student with special needs fell during an unsupervised moment and wasn't noticed until a custodian found him. That custodian reported it. Nothing changed. Moore's face tightened. I didn't know, she said quickly. You didn't ask. The words weren't accusatory, just facts, but they landed heavily. She leaned back, the pen now forgotten on the desk. I care about this school, she said, quieter now. I've worked hard. I know, Dorsey replied, and I'm not here to dismiss that. But leadership is more than data reports and policy rollouts. It's about how people feel when they walk through these doors, every person. Moore nodded slowly, the impact of his words beginning to settle in. You said you wanted to observe, she said, trying to shift the tone. So what now? Dorsey stood, smoothed the front of his worn shirt. Now, he said, we stop mistaking silence for satisfaction. Then he opened the office door and stepped into the hallway, leaving her alone with a truth she hadn't expected to confront this early in the day. But it was just beginning. Dorsey didn't walk fast. He moved the way someone does when they've got nothing to prove. Steady. Intentional. The halls were in full swing now. Students laughing, lockers slamming, teachers corralling stragglers toward classrooms. He walked past it all without drawing attention, until he reached the cafeteria. Inside, 2 custodians were stacking crates of milk. A third was wiping down a table near the back. None of them noticed him at first. Then one looked up. Dorsey? The man asked, surprised. Thought you were off this week. I was, Dorsey said, stepping closer. But plans changed. They nodded, unsure what that meant. You still working nights, Luis? He asked the man with the milk crates. Yeah. Got moved off days after the budget shift. They said it was temporary. Dorsey looked at the dark circles under his eyes. You're still picking up the weekend shift too? Luis hesitated, then nodded. They need the coverage. I don't mind. You shouldn't have to carry all that without support. Luis gave a small shrug, like he didn't expect anything to change. The table cleaner approached, wiping his hands on a rag. You here for something? He asked, friendly but curious. Did they call you in for plumbing again? Dorsey smiled faintly. No, he said. I'm here as the new superintendent. The silence was instant. Luis blinked. The table cleaner froze. The third custodian looked up from his mop, eyes wide. None of them spoke. You're joking, one of them finally said. Dorsey just shook his head. The realization hit slowly, like something too heavy to process all at once. Dorsey didn't gloat. He didn't change his tone. He just said, I wanted to see how the school worked from the inside, what people noticed, what they ignored. One of them exhaled sharply, still stunned. I don't even know what to say. Dorsey looked at each of them. You don't need to say anything. Just keep doing the work you've always done. But from now on, you won't be doing it invisible. He gave a nod. And then he left the cafeteria, the quiet behind him louder than any applause could have been. By the time Dorsey reached the main hallway again, word had begun to spread. Not through announcements, not through emails, just whispers, the kind that ripple fast when something shifts. A senior student near the lockers nudged her friend, nodding toward Dorsey. That's the janitor guy, she whispered. He's like, the superintendent now? No way, the friend replied, skeptical. But their eyes followed him. In the front office, the assistant secretary from earlier stood frozen behind her desk. Her phone rested in her hand, but she'd stopped mid-dial. She watched as Dorsey passed by, expression unreadable. He paused at the doorway. Morning, he said, voice even. She blinked. Good morning. Her face flushed. He didn't hold it against her, just nodded politely and kept walking. Inside the staff lounge, a few teachers were sipping coffee and prepping for the day. One of them, Mr. Clarkson, a history teacher in his 30s, leaned against the counter. He spoke without looking up. Custodial must be short again. just saw Dorsey heading toward the admin wing. Mrs. Mendez, across from him, paused mid-sip. You didn't hear? Hear what? She lowered her cup. He's the new superintendent. Clarkson laughed. You're kidding. She didn't respond, just looked at him. Slowly, the laugh faded. Across campus, Principal Moore stood just inside her office doorway, watching Dorsey's figure recede down the hall. She wasn't thinking about his job title anymore. She was thinking about everything she hadn't seen. The day hadn't really started yet, but nothing felt routine anymore. Dorsey found an empty conference room near the library. It was quiet, a little dusty around the edges. He pulled out a chair and sat, resting his hands on the table, alone with his thoughts. He didn't need to make a scene. The scene had already made itself. Across the school, small conversations were unfolding. Teachers were replaying interactions in their heads. Some were embarrassed, some defensive, a few curious. Back in the custodial break room, Luis sat on a folding chair, still gripping the same rag he'd used in the cafeteria. You ever seen something like that? One of the others asked. Luis shook his head. Not even close. But he never said anything, the younger one added wide-eyed. He just mopped and scrubbed like the rest of us. That's because he is one of us, Luis said quietly. That's the part people don't get. In the teacher's lounge, Mr. Clarkson stood with a hand on his hip, processing. So what? We're supposed to treat everyone like they might secretly be important? No, Mrs. Mendez said calmly. We're supposed to treat them like they already are. Clarkson didn't answer, just looked down into his coffee. In the parking lot, a group of students crowded around someone's phone. A photo had surfaced. Dorsey, weeks ago, sweeping near the gym entrance, hoodie up, face calm. That's him, one of them said. But he's like, in charge now? No one had a good answer. In the conference room, Dorsey finally stood and pulled out a notepad from his back pocket. He jotted down 3 things: staff relations, facilities inclusion, student trust. Then he circled the last one twice. The bell rang again. Classes began. But the school wasn't the same. Not anymore. Dorsey spent the rest of the morning walking the halls. Not inspecting. Just watching. He passed classrooms with doors wide open, teachers mid-lecture, students half-engaged. He noted which teachers acknowledged the kids walking in late, and which didn't. Which students held the door open for others, and which ones let it slam shut behind them. Outside the counselor's office, a student sat alone on the floor, knees pulled up, earbuds in. No one spoke to him. No one even glanced his way. Dorsey stopped. You okay? He asked gently. The kid pulled out one earbud, looked up, startled. Yeah, he muttered. Just waiting for Mr. Cleary. Dorsey nodded. Long wait. The student shrugged. He's always in a meeting. Dorsey crouched to his level. You talk to anyone else? A teacher, maybe? Nah, the boy said. No one really knows me here. The words hung in the air. Dorsey didn't try to fix it, didn't hand him a card or promise anything dramatic. He just said, they will. Then he stood, gave a small nod, and moved on. Down the hall, a substitute teacher was struggling to regain control of a noisy classroom. Dorsey stopped at the door for a moment, watched. Students laughed, passed notes, ignored directions. He stepped inside. Instant silence. The substitute looked relieved but confused. Dorsey didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten. He simply walked to the front, turned to face the class, and waited. Every student sat up a little straighter. I'm Mr. Dorsey, he said calmly. You'll be seeing a lot more of me. No one knew exactly what that meant, but the message landed. He turned, walked out, and the room stayed quiet after he left. By lunchtime, the story had spread beyond campus. A local education reporter called the district office asking for confirmation. Is it true the new superintendent worked as a janitor undercover? The communications director paused, then gave the only answer he could. Yes, the article didn't publish that day, but the ripple effect had already started. Parents texted each other. One forwarded a screenshot from a PTA group chat. If this is real, it changes everything. Back at the school, Dorsey stood in line at the cafeteria like everyone else. Tray in hand. No special treatment. A lunch server blinked when she saw him. You're him, aren't you? She asked quietly. He nodded. Just here for lunch. She smiled faintly, then scooped a little extra onto his tray. On the house. He didn't make a fuss, just said thank you and moved on. At a nearby table, a cluster of seniors sat whispering. One of them finally stood, approached him with uncertain steps. "Mr. Dorsey?" "Yes. I just wanted to say, that's kind of badass what you did." Dorsey gave a small smile. "I didn't do it to impress anyone." "I know. But still." The student hesitated, then added, "Most people here only pay attention to you if you're loud. You weren't. And now everybody's paying attention anyway." Dorsey nodded slowly. Sometimes stillness speaks louder. The student returned to his table. A few minutes later, a quiet kid in the corner of the lunchroom, the same one Dorsey had seen earlier by the counselor's office, raised his head and watched him from across the room. Not nervously, just seen. And for the first time all day, Dorsey allowed himself the smallest exhale. After lunch, Dorsey made his way to the teacher workroom. It was smaller than he remembered. Paper cluttered the counter. A copier blinked with a red error message. Two teachers stood near the back, grading quizzes and chatting in low tones. They stopped talking when he entered. One of them, Miss Kirkland, looked up slowly. "Mr. Dorsey," she said, as if testing the name again. He nodded once. You were here the whole time?" she asked. "I was." She swallowed. "Why?" "Because I needed to understand what kind of place this is. Not on paper. Not from board reports. Just as it is." The other teacher, Mr. Levy, spoke next. "So what did you see?" Dorsey looked around. At the broken copier, the chipped counters, the half-empty coffee pot. "I saw people doing their jobs," he said. "Some trying hard. Others just getting by. I saw students who feel forgotten. Staff who feel overworked. Custodians who haven't had a proper break room in 5 years." Miss Kirkland looked down. "But I also saw moments of care," Dorsey added. "A math teacher who keeps granola bars in her drawer for hungry kids. A PE coach who walks a student home every Thursday without telling anyone. Small things, but real." Mr. Levy leaned against the counter, arms folded. "And now, Dorsey said, we stop pretending those small things are enough." He stepped past them, paused at the doorway. "You've got good people here. You've also got blind spots. We're going to fix both." Then he left. Behind him, the copier beeped again, blinking the same error. But neither teacher moved to fix it. They were still processing what he'd just said. In the main office, Principal Moore sat at her desk, staring at a blank email draft. She tried to write something, an update to staff, maybe a message of support, but every time her fingers hovered over the keys, they froze. What could she say? That she hadn't recognized the man who worked 2 doors down? That she'd asked him to wait in the lobby like he was running late for a maintenance call? She closed the laptop gently. Outside her door, the assistant secretary stood rigidly at the counter, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was softer now, the usual clipped confidence replaced with something closer to caution. "Yes, he's been on campus most of the day. Yes, the students seem to know now. No, he hasn't called a staff meeting." She glanced at the closed office door, then added, "He doesn't seem like the type who needs one." Across the building, the afternoon was rolling on. Dorsey stepped into a freshman English class. The teacher paused mid-sentence, then cleared his throat and kept going. Dorsey took a seat in the back. Students turned to look, but he gave them nothing to stare at, just calm attention. He watched as a girl in the second row hesitated before raising her hand. The teacher didn't notice. Dorsey did. After a few seconds, she lowered it again. Dorsey made a note in his pad. Student voice. "Missed." The teacher wrapped up with a quick assignment. As students began to pack up, Dorsey stood and walked to the front. "May I?" he asked the teacher. The man stepped aside, unsure. Dorsey turned to the class. "Just one question before you go," he said, calm but direct. "How many of you feel like your voice matters here?" The room went still. A few students looked at each other. One raised a hand halfway, then dropped it. No one answered out loud. Dorsey nodded. "That's all I needed." And he walked out. Behind him, the silence lingered longer than the bell. By mid-afternoon, the district office had started fielding calls from other schools. Principals wanted to know if the rumors were true. A superintendent, disguised as a janitor? Some sounded amused, others anxious. But none of them were surprised that the story had made waves. What surprised them was how quiet Dorsey himself had been about it. He hadn't issued a statement, hadn't called attention to himself. He'd just kept walking the halls. Back at Redwood High, students buzzed with energy between periods. But there was a tension beneath it, a shift. Teachers were more alert, staff more reserved. Dorsey stopped by the back loading dock near the cafeteria. 2 cafeteria workers were unloading boxes of milk and produce. They saw him and froze. "You don't need to stop," he said. "Just wanted to ask a question." One of them, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, nodded warily. "How long has that leaky freezer been giving you trouble?" he asked. "About a year," she replied. "Reported it?" "Twice. They said they'd escalate it." Dorsey nodded. "Has anyone followed up?" She shook her head. He took out his notepad, wrote it down. "I'll handle it," he said. She looked surprised. "Just like that?" He gave a small smile. "It's my job now." The other worker leaned on a dolly, watching him. "Never thought someone up top would ask about a freezer," he said. "That's the problem," Dorsey replied. "We only go up top when something's broken. I'd rather go there before it is." He turned to leave, then paused. "And for the record," he added, "you two keep this place running. Don't think I haven't noticed." They didn't know how to respond, but they wouldn't forget it. The final bell rang just after 3. Students spilled out into the courtyard, voices rising in a familiar end-of-day rhythm. Backpacks slung over shoulders, earbuds in, plans for after-school rides and fast food already in motion. Dorsey stood near the exit gate, not blocking the way, just observing. A few students nodded to him. One waved. From the corner of the courtyard, he saw the same boy from the counselor's office again. Still alone, still quiet. This time Dorsey approached. "You get to talk to Mr. Cleary?" he asked. The boy shrugged. "He said to come back tomorrow." Dorsey nodded. "You will." "Maybe." Dorsey crouched a little, eye level again. "You know, when I was your age, I had to walk to a library just to find a quiet place to think. I didn't talk much. People assumed that meant I didn't have anything to say." The boy looked at him. "What did you do?" "I waited," Dorsey said. "And I listened." Then one day someone listened back. They stood there for a beat. Not awkward, just still. Then the boy nodded, almost to himself. "I'll go back tomorrow." "Good," Dorsey said. "And if he's not there, come find me." "Okay." The boy turned to leave, feet lighter than they'd been that morning. From across the parking lot, Principal Moore had been watching. She didn't approach, just stood beside the flagpole, arms crossed, the weight of the day finally beginning to settle. She wasn't angry. She was reevaluating, not just him, herself. The building emptied slowly. Teachers packed up, still murmuring about what had unfolded. A few glanced toward the conference room where Dorsey had spent part of his day, now dark and silent. Inside the front office, the assistant secretary finally shut down her computer. Her posture was stiffer than usual. As she grabbed her bag, she noticed Dorsey passing by the window, heading for the exit. She stepped out before she could talk herself out of it. "Mr. Dorsey?" she called. He stopped, turned. "I just wanted to say," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "About this morning. I didn't know." He looked at her evenly. "I understand. I wasn't trying to be dismissive," she added quickly. "It's just we get a lot of drop-ins. Vendors, deliveries, facility calls. It's hard to know who's who sometimes." Dorsey nodded once. "I know." She seemed to relax slightly. "But that's the point," he added. "You didn't know, so you assumed." She swallowed. "I'll do better," she said, softer now. "That's all I ask." He started to leave, then paused. "What's your name?" he asked. She blinked. "Taylor." He nodded. "Have a good evening, Taylor." Then he walked out into the late afternoon sun, leaving her standing there, still holding her bag, still thinking. Inside the main hallway, a custodian swept slowly near the lockers, unaware that anyone had been watching all day. But someone had, and that changed everything. At the district office, the board chair was finishing up calls when his assistant knocked softly. "He's here." The chair stood, smoothed his tie. "Send him in." Dorsey entered, still in his navy work shirt, still carrying the same notepad. The chair offered a handshake. "Heard you made quite an impression." Dorsey shook it, but didn't smile. "That wasn't the goal." "No?" "Because the phones haven't stopped. Staff, parents, even a few board members. Most want to know why you didn't tell anyone." "Because I didn't want a stage," Dorsey said. "I wanted a mirror." The chair tilted his head. "And what did you see?" Everything they don't report. He opened his notepad and slid it across the desk. A list. Concise, specific, staff morale, facilities backlog, student isolation, cultural gaps. The chair glanced down, skimmed it, then looked up again. Are you planning a public statement? Eventually, Dorsey said, but not for attention, just clarity. I want people to understand the work ahead, not the story. The chair leaned back, exhaled. You've made your presence known. Dorsey's tone didn't change. That wasn't the hard part. No, he shook his head. The hard part starts tomorrow, when they realize I wasn't just visiting. The chair gave a slow nod, and for a moment the room was quiet. Two men sitting with the truth between them. No politics, no press, just a shared understanding. Everything had just changed. The next morning, Redwood High felt different. Not louder, not busier, just more aware. Teachers arrived earlier than usual. Custodians moved through halls that didn't feel as invisible. Students watched the adults with sharper eyes, picking up on things they might have ignored before. In the main office, Taylor, no longer just the secretary, greeted staff by name, paused to ask a custodian if they'd had coffee. They had. She smiled anyway. Down the hall, Principal Moore stood outside the staff lounge with a clipboard. Not in her office, not behind glass. She was asking questions, listening, and for once nobody looked past her. In the courtyard, the boy from the day before sat on the bench outside the counselor's office, waiting again but not hunched, not hiding. This time, when Mr. Cleary walked by, he stopped. You here to talk? The boy nodded. The counselor opened his door. Across campus, a bulletin board had been cleared and replaced with something new. What would make you feel seen? Blank cards, a box of pens. And by noon, it was already half full. Dorsey didn't give a speech, didn't schedule an assembly. He just returned to campus, walked the halls like before, and stopped to ask quiet questions no one else had thought to ask. And the school responded not with applause, but with stillness. The kind that happens when people realize they missed something important. In the teacher's lounge, Mr. Levy stood over the coffee maker. He turned to Ms. Kirkland. You think he's really going to change things? She poured her coffee slowly. I think he already did. And outside, near the same gate where he'd stood the day before, Dorsey watched the school move. Still steady, still quiet, because real change doesn't start with power. It starts with who you choose to see, and who you refuse to overlook.